Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is we can lead with our hurts or we can lead with our hearts, which is such a powerful and, dare I say, channeled statement that Bridgie came across when she was reflecting on some journaled notes.
Yeah, God, it just takes you right to that point, right? Like in every moment we're choosing.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yes.
Like in every moment we're choosing or not, right? We're either responding to past feelings, which just habitually create a patterned response in us, or we're choosing.
Yeah, you still have a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes that choice to do something that's different, that leads from the heart and not from the hurt, can be so big, it feels like you're going through a drug withdrawal.
Yeah, totally.
Because that is how deep our patterns can go.
Oh.
So I want to preface this episode with like enormous amount of compassion and we have been where you are. We continue to be where you are because that is the human condition.
Oh, amen.
But that's where I want to take the conversation today.
Yeah, no, I really love it because I think it actually leads on powerfully from where our conversation has been in the last, 4 weeks or so. When we're talking about how do we have hard conversations? How do we show up and do better in our relating skills and in our communication? Like all of that leads ultimately also to this question, right? How do we focus on our impact rather than just our intent? As Tara Braun so beautifully reaffirms in all of her diversity and inclusion work. And yet it rings for me with such a clarity of truth through all areas of life, relationship in particular. Because if you only focus on, well, I'm a good person and your intent, you miss the hurt that you just wielded in the other person's experience and therefore take no accountability.
Yeah. Oh, God, yes.
And
I lived that this weekend, actually, with my children. Like it's
that's good. That's a great story to lead from.
Yeah.
I just want to say this is the thing that I find as a facilitator of couples, the most challenging to move beyond is accountability. And yet it is the number one thing that I think pivots on having everything that you want in a relationship and feeling resentful and let down in a relationship. It's accountability is, can I hold myself enough to meet you? Can I focus on the impact of my behavior without it needing to mean anything about me as a human that I have to defend and be reactive about? Because I'm actually so fragile that I have to fight you to say how worthy I am and how I'm not like that. Because I'm so focused on my intent and holding on to the identity that I'm a good human. So this conversation of intent versus impact, I think, is pivotal to all relations.
Yeah.
And is ultimately the crux of this statement. Can we lead with our heart and our compassion beyond our crushing, collapsing human self? That is where our old wounds are.
Yeah.
Because if I was really like that, then who would I be? Like my dad? Like my mum? Like the bully from school? I'm not that. Right? So if you hold on to old hurt versus compassionate, I've got me, I can feel you and meet you there. Where can you go in relationship? Not very far. But it's a fragile sense of self, right?
And it speaks to, you know, how much you need to attach the identity you've created for yourself, that if that crumbles, then who are you? Like it just shows how unstable we might be in relationship to ourselves when we can't go there and look at our impact.
Right.
And I've said this before, like I think in a podcast or even in conversation with you, like what I do with when I have an argument with my husband and when he'll tell me things about my impact, I actually have a process of going and writing it down.
Oh, do you? Okay, this is fascinating. Let's just slow this part down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because this is you recognizing at some point in your evolutions, in self or together, you feel free to correct me in a moment, is you've gone, this is dysfunctional. The more I hold on to my own righteousness, the less I'm able to move forwards in relationship with you.
Yeah.
So here's how I'm going to help my own righteousness, which I recognize is my wounding, so I can meet you and not meet my wounding.
Yeah. I love the way that you've interpreted that, because exactly
how powerful is that?
What was that?
I said, how powerful was that?
Oh, so powerful. Yeah, so powerful.
So powerful. It short-circuited your system.
I did. I was like, hang on, what? I felt like there was another voice. Like we were like listening back to ourselves.
Oh, maybe there was.
God has spoken. But the reason why I do that is because, like, my husband is a beautiful man, but his wounding has led him to minimize his expression. So he internalizes a lot.
What does that mean? Like, give us the human, how does that look?
So he just keeps on keeping on, and he's exceptionally patient. He doesn't reveal a lot of emotion. So he has to be really at breaking point before it all comes out. And so my practice is creating safety in our nervous systems to allow that to come out earlier, but also recognizing that that's childhood trauma laid down for decades that will take decades possibly to unwind and create safety for. So when I get a little glimpse of all the stuff he's been holding on to that has come out with no filter, I ask myself to hold myself enough to hear it and not collapse, so I can go and write it down, so I can come and reflect on what's my part. Because it, of course, all of the you're always and you're never isn't true.
Yeah.
Because it's imperative language, it's one-sided language. In his experience, that's how it feels.
Yeah.
So because I love him, I also have to love myself past the parts of me that want to go, but it's you, but I'm not, and I try, and you just don't. So I have a practice of writing it down so that I can, in moments of stickiness in relationship, I can come back to this and go, okay, what's the pattern here? And how can I meet that and care for him and show to me, or show to him, his worthiness, so that it's safe for him to express that and not hold it all in.
And does he know that's your process? Like, have you got a pre-established, when you say that to me, here's what I'm going to say to you so you know I haven't left you, and here's what I'm doing, and I'll like, do you have that sort of set up? Not
distinctly. He knows I have my own way of processing these things. He's less interested in my way of processing these things. It's a softly approach, bringing him to where I'm at with that. And that's
a rupture. So he like goes, bleh, and you automatically go, okay, I actually know this is his experience of me, which I loved your words. This is his experience of me.
Yeah.
It's not me, it's his experience of me, which is enough of a mental pathway for you to go, and here's the pattern interrupt I need to put into place to make sure that I actually end up where I want to end up and don't keep repeating fate and old wounds.
Yeah.
So what happens in that moment where he goes, bleh, what do you do then?
So then I basically, rather than try to let my body close, I will open my body and try to stay safe in that space, like noticing the parts of me that want to go, well, fuck you, like, which is my MO. Like mine's, well, I'll push you so far away from me so I don't have to feel that, you know, or I'll push you away and be so self-sufficient that I don't need you anyway.
Yeah.
Which is my wounding with the masculine.
Yeah.
So what I do is I hear it because I want him to feel safe enough in a relationship that he can be heard. And then I'll reveal like how that feels to hear that. And then often I'll then go away and I'll do what I need to do. And depending on the time of day, if it's like night and there's space and he can hear me, I'll bring it back to him and say, look, I heard you say before XYZ. I really want to understand more about that. When would be a good time for us to talk about it? Because you've revealed to me something that I wasn't really very conscious of. And I want to see what I can do for us to move forward. So it looks a little bit like that, a version of that.
And so in that initial moment where you've then revealed and then you know you need to take yourself away, do you say something to him in that?
Yeah, I'll often say, look, I just need some time on my own for a minute to be with this.
Yeah, okay. This is also the thing that I find interesting is, and Esther Perel, I know, talks about this a lot, which is it takes two to create a dynamic. So the dynamic that you're currently cycling in is a co-created with equal 100% responsibility in its creation, but it only takes one to change it.
Yeah, which is so empowering and terrifying as well if you're asking yourself to step up.
Yeah, I mean, tell me how you feel about this, because I hear this from clients all the time, which is, why is it always me? If you didn't do that, would he?
No.
Do you ever get resentful of that?
I have in the past, before I took ownership, but I don't feel like it happens enough for me to build resentment around it. Because we don't have big arguments like this often. If I felt like there was a brick wall that I was constantly up against, then yes, I would. And I would probably push a lot more accountability back to him. But there's enough in our relationship. There is enough caring and concern and check-ins that build a really strong kind of love language, that it means that the ruptures aren't big enough to build big resentments, if that makes sense. So the baseline caring is there enough to act as like a buffer, I think, around that.
Yeah, fascinating. What would you say to the person that's like, it's always fucking me?
I would challenge them to look for where this other person or where their partner is making a bid for connection, but it's just not the way you want it.
Clever.
Because their bid for connection will likely just look different and you're not appreciating it. And so you're both kind of trying to get the same need met, but in different ways. So instead of kind of meeting in this place, you're kind of like, if you could see my hands right now, they're kind of like sliding kind of in this weird, you just miss each other. And so neither of you are able to really articulate exactly how you need it. And so it always feels like you're always the one, and he's probably feeling like nothing he ever does is right.
I had another question there, and that's just evaded me. What about accountability? So let's say in that moment, you know, Marcus is, which we all do, is doing the it's you, it's your fault, you're making me feel thing. and you're like, it's always me. If I don't deepen this moment, if I don't claim my responsibility in this moment, he can't and won't.
If I felt like if it was really untrue in my body and he was continually at that, that would be when I would pull him into accountability. Where I would say, that is not true. Because my experience is, and then lay that out.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be so much of a kind of wallflower that I own it all and let it all be on me. If I can clearly see that there's a lack of ownership, then I will go back in the moment rather than rest on it.
Yeah. I actually think that's one of the kindest things that we can do for our partner in relationship. I truly do. Because in actual fact, it's the feminine aspect that rages like that goes, it's all you, and now it's this big, and makes the mountain out of the molehill and creates all of this meaning and all of this story, and now I've got all of these feelings, there's all this shit in my back pocket, and I'm bringing it out and spewing it.
I'm bringing it all and I'm spewing it onto you.
That's right. Like, that's actually the feminine.
Yeah.
Because the masculine is the part that comes in and has a vision beyond this moment and says, this is destructive. We have a vision on how it's going to be better in the future, which changes how we show up in this moment. So if you have an integrated masculine, that's the part that plays in here. So you're not just a tornado spewing and destroying all over your partner.
Yeah.
But if you don't have an integrated masculine in that moment, and it's all feminine rage, because there's just as much shadowy feminine or toxic feminine as there is toxic masculine. And this is what it looks like. I will tear you to pieces. And I'll create all of the story and the loops and the chaos that make me right, and more and more and more and more. That's the toxic feminine. It needs some masculine, doesn't have it in that moment. So the partner, like you, Bridgie, and as you and I've said often, we have reflective relationships, but often in the reverse, that's Nick for me. So I can have a feminine that does that like wields and just has a wrecking ball to my husband. Actually, there's a part of me that even as I'm in wrecking ball mode, and I imagine it'd be the same for Marcus, that's like, I kind of know this isn't true.
Yeah, but you're enjoying it.
But this feels really good. And actually, I've been holding on to some shit. So I just really want you to feel that.
Yeah.
And this feels really good. So I don't need to exit it because it feels really good to get it out. And like you, it's his masculine that goes, hold on a moment. I will not let you abuse me in that way. That's, he wouldn't say abuse, but I'm just saying.
Or I let you speak to me like that, or whatever it is.
Which is what you're doing. When you're saying, no, that is untrue. These are the times where that, has happened in the opposite, or whatever you would bring evidence for that pulls that down into something more rational. It's those moments that actually offers the feminine an opportunity to come back into its gifts, because it's gone into a toxic state. That actually goes, stop. I won't let you destroy you, me, this. Come back. So that actually, the fact that Nick can call me out on my shit, or you can call Marcus out on his, or whoever our listener is.
Or he calls me out on mine. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah.
Is actually the gift. Only we like to read it in our culture as there's something wrong with you and how dare you and I'm perfect as I am. But the gift
which makes us think we're in some kind of glass trophy cabinet where we can do no wrong, or, it's somebody outside of us.
I reflect often on the fact that whilst it's painful in the moment, that is the best fucking thing Nick could do for me as a human, for me as a spiritual being, for me as a lover, and for our relationship and family. It's the best thing he could do for me in that moment.
Even when it hurts, even when it's part of me. You can't even hold me.
It hurts. I can think of so many moments. I even think about it in terms of when we first met. I was still cycling through some pretty intensive trauma abuse patterns, particularly when it came to sexuality. So I was dating 3 other people while I was dating Nick. Talk about body abuse and just leaving myself. It's, you know, one of the ways that childhood sexual abuse can go. And I remember about 3 months into our relationship, I remember him looking at me with this total, like, fucking masculine as fuck body, but this open heart that just reflected how much I was breaking his heart in the moment. Not because I was doing something to him, but I was breaking his heart by him watching me do this to me. Watching me do this to me. Did that make sense then?
Yeah.
And it was actually that moment that made me go, what are you doing? And that almost has set the pathway for the rest of our relationship. Because anytime I move back into those toxic pathways, he like goes, what are you doing?
Oh, God, I love that.
Oh, I tell you, I reflect on it often, and particularly the older I've gotten, and the more I do relationship work, the more I think, what is that? And in actual fact, that's what that is calling me out on my shit. Because it's bullshit. What I was doing was bullshit. But I was in it. I couldn't see it. And I didn't.
Isn't that just, that is masculine in full consciousness who can do that.
This is my point.
And in fact, it's like, of all the times I can like count on my hands where I've completely unhinged feminine Marcus. One of them was, I remember this car trip, and it would have been about 12 years ago before when we were engaged. And I was just noticed I was having these like wild feelings of infatuation and attraction to other men. And I couldn't, like, it was getting to the point where I was feeling guilty about it and not knowing what to do with it. And I just couldn't handle it or stand it in my body anymore. So I just, like, verbal diarrhea, blurted it all out, all of this stuff that was going on for me. And like, I didn't know why I was feeling like this. And I was crying and just all this stuff. And he was driving and he was like, all I can do is love you and just keep loving you the best that I can, because I'm here and I want to love you. And it was just that capacity to just be unwavering and accepting and being so solid when I was so like water and like the ocean was just I can still feel it, and it just opened. All it did was just expand my heart even more for him. And after that, it was like a big shift, because I was like, fuck, like, he's got me. So can I lean into this? Can I let myself be held like this?
Yeah, because
instead of be pulled.
Yeah, because anything else is me in that moment, right? Like, in that moment, it's so clear. I'm here. I'm loving you as best I can. What are you going to do with that?
Yeah. And it was so, and he was so strong in himself. He didn't need to do any convincing. He just knew he could love me and continue to love me, right? But he wasn't attached to me loving him. He was just the consciousness that held it all together. Like, how fucking beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So sometimes we have to just, let our heart lead, right? Like, and be courageous enough to reveal it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when we see that choice, we get to choose. Are we going to keep leading with the hurt? Let's take my example and then we'll move to you, Bridgie. Was I going to just keep fucking randos? Or was I going to choose a heart-aligned choice? Both of them are choices. And for you in that moment, right? Were you going to flitter off with randos?
Yeah.
Were you going to turn towards the love that was there? Like, it's a choice.
Yeah.
We always have a choice. In this moment, am I going to continue with the cycles of abuse, trauma, hurt, and pain? Show up with those, for those, essentially in devotion to those? Or am I going to re-navigate? And And it's not an easier choice. Growth isn't.
No.
It hurts.
And often you're fighting instant gratification.
Yeah.
And if potentially you're in this dynamic in a relationship where it's easy socially to make your partner wrong for maybe their behavior, you're also not only fighting your instant gratification and seeking something else that feels better in your body, you're also fighting social mores that make him wrong or her wrong.
Yeah, totally.
Which feeds your story.
Yeah.
And disconnects you from your partner.
Yeah.
Which we do it also with children. Like, we can find all the reasons why children misbehave, right? Or we can find all the reasons why there's something wrong with our child, instead of going, okay, what's really here?
Yeah.
Beyond all the things that my head wants to tell me it is.
Yeah. We're just interrupting this podcast on we can lead with our hurts or we can lead with our hearts to let you know what we've got going on right now.
Coming up with me, Bridget, it is Disrupt, Revealing the Mother Wound, where we unpack your imprint and the broader socio-cultural imprint of motherhood so that you can find more fulfillment, freedom and joy in your mothering journey. Find out about that at bridgetwood.life. And you, Jules?
Is Lovers School, which is 4 weeks together on redefining pleasure, passion and polarity with a sexuality focus. And you can find out more at julietenner.love. Yeah, I just thought also in this conversation it was worth touching on shame and guilt, only because I think they're the two emotions that get in the way of accountability. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, shame, it's that feeling that we want the floor to swallow us up. So as if we actually want to go and be in it any longer. And then guilt is this idea that we've somehow caused more drawback or hurt to somebody else. And that we therefore need to somehow like remedy it or fix it or do something to get ourselves out of that guilt cycle. But that just keeps us stuck in a pattern as well, because we'll keep doing the same thing in order to try to somehow remedy what we're feeling guilty about. But until we address the guilt for what the content is there, it's like it just festers. A little bit like I had to actually go and excavate all these feelings that I was having, bring them to the surface of my relationship, like toss them all out and let them be seen. Instead of, shove them down, which is what my conditioning had taught me to do, because they were wrong.
Yeah, because shame's that you look down on yourself inwardly.
Yeah.
Guilt is that there's structures outside of you looking down on you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Both of them, neither of them create a space in which you're free for choice. Because in both of them, you're like in shame, get covered in self-minimization, potentially even down all of the way down the emotional scale to hatred. How can you possibly make a heart and soul aligned choice when you're on that spiral? Like you
can't, because all you're doing, it's like the animal in you, all it's trying to do is crawl out of the hole.
Yeah.
It's very hard to access a higher consciousness from that place because it's so low. It's just such a low vibration that it's just survival. And it's like, what can I do next to get me out of here?
Yeah. So you'll either hate the person that you perceive as making you feel this way, or you'll hate yourself enough that you'll claw really hard to get yourself out of it, but still self-focused.
Instead of what you can give.
Yeah, instead of how we show up in this moment. Anyway, I just thought it was worth having a look at shame and guilt, just because they are probably the two that we're going to run into that prevent us from taking accountability in this moment, that prevent any one of us from deepening an experience or a dynamic that creates a different outcome.
Yeah.
Because we're always going to revert to hurt, like our pattern or our patterns that have been laid down. We will always revert to those unless there's a level of consciousness. We can't be conscious all the time.
No.
So it's folly to think that we can, even on some level, evolve beyond. Like I have such a body felt sense of I don't know what the word is, but how we're like, in the animalesque DNA made flesh part of me.
Mm.
So it's pointless trying to remove myself from my bodysuit
in order to not feel it.
In order to not feel it, or assume that I can somehow astral above it.
Mm. That's the epitome of spiritual bypassing.
Yeah. As opposed to, wow, this exists. This is my belief that set up this story that filters how I see the world, which influences how I show up in every moment. I'll probably always come back to that. Or it'll catch me. I'm like, I thought I was done with that. And then boom, it's back. Oh, God, damn it. Here you are again.
Fuck you, but let's get to work.
But I just think that's we will get faster and better at pulling ourselves out of it and continuing into a more aligned belief system. But my point is, we will always revert to our creation stories.
Yes.
So it's just such folly to think that you won't.
You just get better at noticing it and get better at the toolkit for moving out of it so that it doesn't
keep into the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're like, oh no, I'm just, I've moved beyond that. That's not a story playing out for me. And therefore in this moment, I'm righteous rather than running a wound, which is what you're doing in that moment. If you've put yourself or someone else above you or below you, you're in some form of righteousness. And you're not going to be able to connect to the heart, which sits in the middle at equilibrium in either of those scenarios.
Yeah. It's an invitation into humility, isn't it? Because until we're really willing to feel that and to be almost kind of like lean back to see wisdom where we want to see what's wrong or not right, until we can do that, we can't really be in the heart. Because we're in the head assessing it and trying to figure out where we play on some kind of invisible scale of right and wrong. Instead of asking ourselves what's here to feel that I don't want to feel, and how can I ask myself to move a little closer?
And what does it ask me to do? Probably strip away some layers of ego and identity. Like that's actually the painful bit, is the stripping of ego. It's not in and of itself painful, but the constructs that you've created that say I'm this and I'm that, when you have to let go of those, it feels like a peeling of a skin.
Yeah. Or sometimes like a death, depending on how much you've attached to them. And this is also the value of shadow work. If you can't go and look at your shadow, then that makes this infinitely more difficult. Because if you can't own your shadow, then you sure as shit aren't going to be very comfortable with it in the people most close to you.
Yeah. And I also think how do we lead with heart instead of hurt plays out in relationship, as we've just talked about endlessly, and parenting, right? Like in each of those moments, how do you start to dissolve what's me and what's them?
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, like at the weekend, I was alerted to a scenario that I wasn't aware of, around the dynamic that my son was involved in with some other children feeling bullied. So
just want to reflect on the parent level. It's really painful.
Yeah, it's really painful. And I could sense this beautiful mother, who's also a listener of the podcast. So hi. This beautiful mother, looking back, she was kind of like feeling me out in terms of like my read on my son's relationship with this other child, who's incidentally his best friend. And I'm like, yeah, like, it's been great in lockdown. They've been like, been able to catch up. And it became increasingly apparent that there's a bit of a dynamic where my son isn't particularly nice to be around when he's with this boy, and that some other younger boys feel quite bullied as a result at the skate park when the two of them are together. And so it was actually playing out in front of me that morning, where this other boy said to my son, I feel you're bullying me, to my son. And so my son's like, no, I'm not. And it's that perfect example, right? Someone's revealing their impact. And my son's saying with his intent, no, I'm not. Like, I didn't, because he didn't intend to. but this child's revealing the impact, whether you intended it or not. I feel hurt.
Mm.
And then I having this big conversations with my son separately, and he's saying, but I was like nice to him this morning and I was including him. And I'm saying, okay, but let's reflect on every other time where this boy might have come to the skate park and felt like the third wheel, or felt like he wasn't part of it, or felt judged. And so he's got all of these things stacked up, all of these experiences. So you only have to maybe look at him a little differently, or not quite be enthusiastic about choosing to play with him right now. And he's bringing up all of that experience and all of that hurt. And so by you just saying, no, I didn't, you're showing a lack of willingness to hear about the impact you're having on another person. And so it was this whole big thing of like discussing impact. And also, if you're not speaking up about behavior that you see is hurting somebody else, you're also complicit. You also, by association, very often in friendships, become complicit in that behavior perpetuating because you're not pulling it up. Mm. And so it was hard because my son's crying and like I'm feeling like, oh God, like this is hard to hold. And then eventually we got to the point of repair, and this beautiful boy was like really willing to hear it. And then he said to me, I feel so good in my body now. And so it was lovely. And they've now caught up heaps of times since, just the two of them, and they've, mended the relationship. But it was just that reminder of like, we as parents also have to cultivate the willingness to move toward the part of us that feels, maybe defensive or a bit unsteady when our children are implicated in hurtful behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. Fuck yeah. God, that's hard. It's so hard. So hard. So hard. Gosh, Bridgie, that's such a, I'm just reflecting on it all at once. It's hitting me and I'm not verbalizing any of it.
Yeah. And I said to this mother, and I said to her, I said, I'm just really grateful that you raised this, like, and that you, felt
safe enough to
raise it with me, because I want to know that, particularly when you and I do this work and I seek as much as possible to bring consciousness to my unconscious. I also need to do that with my children.
Yeah, I know. It's so hard.
We also all have blind spots of which we will never fully see.
Yes, I was about to say that. Yes.
Will we?
Yes. And especially when it comes to our kids, because ultimately, even though we like to say that, they're separate beings, we really just see a reflected version of self.
Yeah. So we see, so we also, that about them. Totally.
And add a layer on that is the system that's set up with motherhood, which is if there's anything in inverted commas wrong with your child, it's your fault.
Yes. Yeah. So we've also got that playing out as well.
Which is like this motherhood thing that makes you go, I haven't done good enough.
Mm.
And how much you collapse into that or can hold that also defines what happens next.
Exactly. And that's also part of why we need to understand and become empowered in knowing that we exist within that system. Because if we don't have awareness that we exist in a system that also undermines us at the same time as puts everything on top of us, then that becomes one more burden.
Do you need to go to that?
I can hear. So this is the 8-year-old supposedly babysitting.
Yeah, we were just saying, I don't think that the podcast heard that though, because we were streaming.
Oh, yes. So we're in lockdown and our older children are babysitting our younger children. I think he's just stepped in. That was my toddler yelling at the door.
Yeah, which is totally fine. I just want to check whether because you didn't have to keep pushing through is my point. Do you need to?
I can see him.
It seems all right, but I just wanted to check in.
Thanks for checking. I can hear him talking to her. And I think he's directing her elsewhere. So I think we're okay.
Well done, him. We just want to hope that both our 8-year-olds are looking after yours is 2. Mine's
yeah. So go 8-year-olds. They have savings goal. Mine has a savings goal. So he's quite rising to this opportunity.
Totally. And it's so wonderful for them just developmentally, I think.
Totally. And it deepens the relationship between siblings as well, that she can, I said to her before I came in, I said, no, Hugo's going to look after all of your needs while I'm in here. She obviously forgot that. That's okay. She's gone back and she's
2. Yeah.
She's 2. She's going to forget that.
That's how it goes. But how amazing to go instead of I can't work or I can't blah, 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 is how do you get creative, and it's a win-win.
Yeah. How can I? I love that. Whenever I go, I can't. Well, actually, no. How can I?
Yeah, let's just get a little more creative.
Yeah. I can't. It's just my brain's being lazy, and I haven't asked a good enough question yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to reflect also that I really was feeling that mum and you in that whole story. And I imagine that all of our listeners were too, because I've totally been in that position too. I think it's socially and within a school system easier, or even a social system easier, to be the mum of a victim than it is a mum of a bully.
Because lots of people will side with the mum. You'll feel
an outline of
yeah.
And there's this sense of casting shame and judgment on the perpetrator.
Yeah.
Which, by virtue of, our cultural system continuing, your kids are shit, therefore you must be a shit mum.
They you must be, exactly. Yeah. And then there's the other layer of how I relate to this other child's mum, like the best friend's mum. And the new boundaries that I'm putting in place as a consequence of this feedback.
Yeah.
And how much I take ownership of what's my son's and what might be her son's. Like that's a whole other thing, right? So it's all just relationship too. And how much we can lean into relationship.
Yeah, totally.
And take the parts that are ours, like own the parts that are ours.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would just say for any mum who finds themselves in that scenario that it's okay to, just like Bridget did in her relationship, to just go, okay, I just need a bit of time to digest that. I will come back to you, blah, blah, blah. Because that initial rise and all of those defense programs, and whether you are a fight, flight or freeze mechanism, will come up in that. So will your wounding and your inner child. And if you're in reaction, you're not in choice. So just building in for yourself a buffer zone so you can just kind of work all of that muddle of emotions and chaos out. I would just say that that's been my biggest learning. I can remember the first time it happened to me, Bridget, I was in a very similar circumstance to you, and I just freaked out. Because I was such a conscious mum, I invested this was my eldest son too, invested every waking moment in these children. Like, how could they possibly be?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah.
And so to have this mum reflect something, I was like, no. And I got angry. And in actual fact, if my son has something to tell me, I'll hear it from him, not from you.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Because I go into fight mode. Like, I just also want to say, this is baseline programming. So because my mechanism is fight, unconsciously,
that's what's going to come up. Yeah.
That's what comes up. I'm not even conscious, literally, in those stress states of what happens in my body and what comes out of my mouth. Literally, there's I'm gone. Like, conscious, like a switch. I'm gone. And so whatever comes out is fight of some sort, because that's
mine's flight. So I had to fight every part of me that just wanted to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Go and deal with this shit at home. Yeah. But actually, when I had time to think about it, I thought, no, because then this is not going to be resolved. So let's just labor the point here in our little corner of the skate park, my son and I.
Wow.
God, I so
very well doing that, there and then too. I'm not sure that, I think now I could, but me then, when my Heath was your Hugo's age, I don't know if I would have been able to move beyond my fight response in that moment, to regulate myself and my wounding. I'm not sure if I could have done that. So I want to first say well done, and also just for our listeners to say, if you can't in that moment, okay.
So what did that look like for you to then kind of own that?
Oh, well, it was a mess, of course, because my fight mode always is, because, it wheels. It is part of my whole, in the last couple of years, that's been my focus point is, you know, I think it came out as anger with my children originally. I spent a lot of time with my maternal rage.
Mm.
And not that I say, you know, it's like gone and I'm so fine with it, but like I have enough strategy around that now that I'm not terrified of it essentially killing one of my children.
Yeah. So
this fight mode in conflict was my next, you know, elephant to chew. So for about 2 years, I really consciously, like, talk about manifestations and intentions at the start of the year. It's been on my board, was how do I make myself really safe in conflict? How do I be in conflict? And instead of like the rush of adrenaline, and I just feel like whew, as it washes through from my feet up my body, I disappear. How do I bring myself back? Because actually what I want to be able to do is actually be here, but I'm not even here. I'm in a trauma state somewhere else.
Somewhere like 20 years ago. Like
probably longer.
Yeah.
Right? Like at some point with enough abuse, I learned to fight my mum. So probably way earlier.
Yeah.
So that for me was really having an acute awareness of, if I don't catch myself in that moment, it actually is more destructive because it wields a bigger destruction. It does.
Yeah.
I don't want to get rid of it because, you know, if someone's trying to rape me or something, that's what I want to come out. Yeah. But I want to be able to have a level of consciousness or embodiment in how. So for me, it was building in that awareness of you've just got to breathe and just give yourself a minute to come back into your body, and then you've got to move away from here, sort your shit, and then you'll be okay. Like just build in that distance instead of reaction, because it's so spontaneous. Just build in a slowing down. And so that evolved then into, with what my nervous system could tolerate, with you know, being in conflict and being embodied, which I think, you know, I'd said to you whenever it was now, a year ago, 2 years ago, I can't even think, when I was in conflict with that dad at basketball. Do you remember?
Yeah, you got that practice right. You practiced
that was a culmination for me where I went, oh, I've been working really hard on this thing and here I am doing it. That's amazing. That's like cool. Me for the whole of my life has wanted to be the me in this moment. You know?
Yeah, that's powerful.
And here I am. So that for me was when that happened. But me back then, when I'm being told that my, you know, beautiful, gentle,
kind,
passionate, kind son was not.
Yeah.
Like,
oh no.
No.
At least he's not true.
And so what I recognized is, like, what I learned from that, it was worse because that was a good friend of mine too.
Yeah.
So the destruction that I created there and the healing and repair that was required in that relationship was hard. Like it's good. We're good friends now. But it was a hard, tenuous process that probably took 4 months before we were back in a comfortable relationship. So there was that. And then I learned then what I need to do is just essentially go, thank you for that feedback. I'll check in with my child and I'll come back with you to you. Because it is also true that sometimes other people have a different version of what happened in reality. And also true that children tell their mums what they need to get the attention that they need. And that may or may not be true of what happened in the moment.
Which is true as well. Yeah.
So I have seen all versions of that. I have seen it's not that like legit didn't happen. It's my version of the story and it's counter opposite to that child's. And I've seen, well, shit, that did happen. How are we rolling with that? So I've just really learned that it's okay for my children to be seen as less than shiny. It doesn't have to mean anything other than they're human. And they've got some growing up to do.
Yeah.
And both of those things are okay.
And how can we love them in that and not shame them as well, like to actually, like, because we're using it as a teaching tool around, you know, his leadership and how he leads, because whether he's aware of it or not, because of his skills, he's leading.
Yeah.
And so how do you want to be as a leader? And so that's the conversations that we're having, but also, of course, knowing that even in your leadership, you're going to both teach and harm, you know, heal and harm. You're going to support and challenge people. You're going to, and if you're constantly attached to how you're perceived, then you care far more about how you feel in response to people liking or not liking you versus what you're actually committed to.
Yeah.
So that needs to be part of the conversation too.
Yeah, totally. So, wow, that was a really big...
Yeah, we didn't really know that was going to go, but there you go.
But I think it just speaks to that core wound of we're always met with our old wounds.
Yes.
And we're always offered opportunities into growth, and we always have choice. Always have choice. In fact, yesterday I was watching Dangerous Minds. Do you remember Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer back from the 90s? I was watching that with my kids yesterday because my teens are back into Gangster's Paradise. You know the song?
Oh, yes, I used to love that. I used to know every word.
Right. And so I'm like, this is such a trip because now my teens are like at the same age I was, right? And so I'm like, oh, we should watch the movie on it. And, you know, it's where, you know, that soundtrack came from, blah, blah, blah. And so we watched it yesterday, and the crux of all of her lessons in the classroom is choice. Yeah.
I haven't seen it for so long, I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
It's all about choice.
That's such a powerful, because it makes sense, of course, Dangerous Minds. Yeah. Your mind will make you or break you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's fascinating that we were watching that yesterday, and that choice message, I just felt like, wow, that was drummed into me because I didn't realize that was in that movie either, but it was like the main crux of her entire classroom teachings. But how funny that now we follow that up with today.
Yeah.
Having this conversation, which is hurt or heart, is choice. Because in every moment you have choice of hurt or heart, of repeat the cycle or change the cycle. And that's all there is. That's all there is. Repeat a cycle, change a cycle. And you always get to choose.
That's
no
so
one's easy, right? So we hope that leaves you with some pretty juicy bites of the elephant. Hopefully not all one.
Stick your teeth into.
But we would love to hear from you if that has created some ripples for you in some way. If you would love to have an extended conversation or question, then we would love to hear from you about what you might like to have represented in the podcast. So please feel free to reach out to us at Nourishing the Mother on Facebook or Instagram and send us a DM, or to emails for bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love, and we will definitely be putting it on our list to bring the conversation wherever it is that you need it.
And what have you got coming up, Jules?
I have just launched Lover School. So I just had a rise of adrenaline and that I had my way through. Because it feels big and scary. I just want to really hone in on the fact that you can look at someone like Bridget or I putting shit out in the world, moving forwards, blah, 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 and you can think, wow, you know, I can't do what she does. I'm too scared. I don't have enough, whatever. But the truth is, I'm shit scared most of the time. And I always bite more than I can chew because I know that's how I'll level up to it.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you stay in your comfort lane.
you ask yourself where you're going to fit it in. Like, you know, if we ask ourselves, where are we going to fit the podcast in, or when can we do it? It would happen. It's just like, it just has to get in. Let's just shoehorn it in somewhere in our week. And
I know I'll show up for it. Yeah. So Lover School, I thought originally would be, because Queen School originally I split into 3 programs. So Queen School, Lover School, Couples School. And then as I've been developing Lover School, I've realized it's really just a whole new course, which means for me it's a whole lot new content and how am I facilitating people through it. So it's like a big up leveling for me. So I just want to say, for anyone who does that thing, is it's not that I'm not scared when I do it. It's just that I can hold myself enough in my fear and keep moving forwards with courage heart-centered courage rather than collapsing in on myself. And I think that that's true for every human who has mastery in anything. I don't think that there's this point where now they somehow are absolved of fear and will never henceforward feel it.
It's just that you take it with you and like tuck it in as something that exists.
Yeah. Stuff through it. So that for me, because I just released it today, has been a big up-leveling over the weekend for me. I think that's probably why I had that rush initially, was I was just trying to give you context on it is that first time I put this baby that I've created out into the world. And for the first time, it's, open for criticism, which is what it can sometimes feel like, right? And you're like, okay, here's this thing and here's how I'm doing it. Like that just is a really big deal. So that's why I needed a minute to regulate. But you have an opportunity to jump into Lover School if you would like to. And I have done it with, if you haven't, it is a level 2 course. So Queen School is level 1. If you haven't done Queen School, you can still get in on this round of Lover School with what I have created as a Queen School Express. So it's core fundamentals. You have to have the core fundamentals to be able to walk the walk and speak the language in Lover's School. To create the changes in sex life, you have to have the basics in communication and understanding your responsibility and accountability, your responsibility in your masculine and your feminine, and the dynamic in relationship, which is what Queen School does. So there is an express version of that. So you can jump into Lover's School this round, and you can find out about that at julietenner.love/programs. And
coming up, I have Disrupt, Revealing the Mother Wound. So that is a 5-week container for us to unravel and pull apart and put back together your mother imprint and mother story, and also look at the broader sociocultural model or framework that we exist in, so that you can look at yourself within that and create some separation from the shame and guilt that can pervade motherhood if we let it. So it's really my desire that anyone who's wanting to mother from a place of more solid ground and enrich their relationships as a mother would feel called to jump into that. So we begin the 25th of October.
BridgetWood.life.
BridgetWood.life. And to find you, Jules?
julietenner.love.
Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.